The courtroom lights held steady. Not warm, not harsh, just present. That kind of lighting that doesn't help anyone feel comfortable, because it isn't meant to. It simply makes everything visible, whether it should be or not. At the plaintiff's table sat Melissa Grant. She wasn't the kind of person who looked dramatic when under pressure. Her stress showed in smaller ways. The careful stacking of documents that had already been stacked. The way she kept checking the same receipts, even though she already knew what they said. The quiet stiffness in her posture, like she had been holding the same problem for too long without being able to set it down. There was exhaustion there too, not loud enough to announce itself, but steady. The kind that builds when you've called maintenance more than once, sent messages that were ignored, and tried to resolve something politely until politeness stopped working. A faint detail sat in front of her folder, an extra printed copy of one invoice, slightly crumpled at the corner. Not because she didn't care, but because she had carried it in her bag for days before deciding this was the only place left where it might matter. Across from her sat Denise Walker. She carried herself differently, controlled, composed, and visibly comfortable in a space that usually made people tense. But there was something slightly sharper underneath that comfort, like she had already decided how she was supposed to be seen and didn't intend to adjust that image. When Melissa glanced at her, Denise didn't look away, not aggressively, not politely, just steadily, like the situation was not new to her, even if it should have been. Beside Denise sat Mark Ellis. Introduced as a witness, he wasn't fidgeting. He wasn't nervous in any obvious way, but his stillness wasn't natural either. It was structured, like someone who had rehearsed being calm rather than simply being calm. Judge Judy entered without delay or ceremony. She didn't scan the room. She didn't acknowledge the audience. She opened the file, read for a few seconds, then closed it with a small, controlled motion that immediately settled the room into attention. "All right," she said. "We're going to start." Her eyes lifted. "Ms. Grant, tell me what happened." Melissa didn't rush her answer. She had already told this story to building management, to maintenance, to herself in different versions over different nights when she couldn't sleep. "I rent the lower unit of a duplex," she said. "Mrs. Walker moved into the unit above me not long ago." At first, everything was normal. A pause, measured. Then the noise started. Late at night. Heavy movement overhead. Not occasional, repetitive. It sounded like furniture being dragged or dropped when nobody should have been active. Denise's expression didn't change, but her attention sharpened slightly, as if she had heard this version before and disagreed with it. Melissa continued, "I didn't go straight to complaints. I wrote a note first. I asked if the noise could be reduced at night because I work early mornings. I kept it polite." A small breath escaped her, controlled. She responded that she wasn't doing anything unusual, and that I was probably overreacting to normal apartment sounds. That sentence landed differently in the room. Not dramatic, but familiar. The kind of response that often ends conversations without resolving them. Melissa's voice stayed steady, but a slight tension formed at the edge of it. After that, I stopped getting responses, but the problem didn't stop. Judge Judy's gaze stayed fixed. "Explain." "Water started coming through my ceiling," Melissa said. "At first, it was staining, then damp patches, then actual dripping during one night." She opened her folder and placed photographs down. They were not staged, not exaggerated, just documentation. Ceiling discoloration, peeling paint, and a repair receipt folded slightly from being handled too many times. I reported it immediately. I had maintenance come out. Twice. There was something practical in the way she said it, like she had already learned that emotion didn't solve structural problems. And I paid for repairs when I was told it was necessary to stabilize the damage. Denise leaned back slightly, as if creating distance between herself and the claim. That's not accurate, Denise said. Calm voice. Careful pacing. Old buildings shift. Pipes make noise. Sometimes leaks appear without anyone causing them. I've lived in rentals for years. I understand how easily things get misinterpreted. Her tone wasn't aggressive. It was controlled enough to sound reasonable. That was what made it effective. Then she added, almost casually, "And I have a witness who can confirm I've been home, quiet, and consistent." Mark Ellis nodded once, subtle and precise, like confirming something already agreed upon. Judge Judy looked at him for the first time. "What's your name?" "Mark Ellis." "And your relationship to Ms. Walker?" "We're friends." A pause followed. Not long, but noticeable enough to register. "Describe what you've observed," Judge Judy said. Mark answered without hesitation. "I've visited her apartment several times. She's quiet, respectful. I've never noticed any disruption or damage." Melissa watched him now more closely than before. "Not emotional, just attentive. Something about the phrasing didn't sit correctly." Judge Judy didn't react. She simply continued. "How many times have you visited her apartment?" Mark didn't hesitate. "About 10 to 12 times." "And over what period of time?" "Several months," he said. Denise didn't look at him, but something in her posture subtly reinforced agreement. Judge Judy turned one page in the file. "Interesting. Not a reaction. A marker." She looked at Melissa. "You're claiming the damage occurred shortly after Ms. Walker moved in?" "Yes," Melissa said. "It started within weeks." Judge Judy nodded once, then turned back to Mark. "How long has Ms. Walker lived in the unit?" "About 6 months," Mark said immediately. That answer arrived too cleanly. Denise's head tilted slightly. Not confusion yet. Adjustment. Judge Judy didn't react immediately. She let the answer settle before continuing. "Lease records state she moved in 3 weeks ago." The room didn't shift loudly. It shifted quietly, which was more effective. Mark blinked once. Denise's expression tightened just slightly, as if recalculating how the room was now supposed to interpret this. Judge Judy continued. "Evenly. You've known her 6 months." "Yes," Mark said, slower now. "But she's been in the unit 3 weeks." A pause. "That is correct." Mark shifted slightly in his seat, the first visible disruption in his structure. "I may have misunderstood the timeline." Judge Judy didn't correct him. "Misunderstood," she repeated. "Or repeated what you were told." Denise spoke immediately. "Your Honor, he's just nervous." Judge Judy raised a hand. Not abrupt, not harsh. Final, not yet. Silence followed, but now it had direction. Judge Judy turned back to Mark. "Have you ever signed the lease?" "No." "Have you ever paid rent there?" "No." "Have you ever been alone in that apartment during the time of the alleged damage?" A pause lengthened slightly. "No." "So your testimony is based on visits and conversations with Ms. Walker?" "Yes." Judge Judy nodded once. "Not independent observation." Mark didn't respond. There was no argument available that didn't collapse further. Denise shifted slightly. Not visibly emotional, but no longer fully anchored in her earlier confidence. Judge Judy turned to her. "Do you understand the difference between first-hand testimony and repetition?" Denise held steady. "He's seen my apartment. He has not verified any disputed event," Judge Judy said calmly. Denise tried again. "He knows I'm not careless." That line stayed in the air longer than intended. Judge Judy opened a document and slid it forward. "Let's address the damage." Melissa straightened slightly as the maintenance report came into view. Denise's case had relied on interpretation. This did not. Judge Judy continued. "The inspection report shows no evidence of leakage from the upper unit during the relevant time frame." A pause. It also shows internal pipe degradation within your own unit consistent with localized failure. Denise frowned slightly. That's not what I experienced. Judge Judy looked at her directly. Experience does not determine causation. That sentence shifted the room more than anything prior. Denise opened her mouth, then closed it. The structure she had built was no longer aligning cleanly. Mark remained silent. He had already stepped out of relevance without realizing when it happened. Judge Judy closed the file slowly. This court does not evaluate narrative. A pause. It evaluates evidence. Her eyes moved briefly to Mark, and when a witness has no independent knowledge of the facts, their testimony carries no weight. Mark lowered his gaze slightly. Not defeated, just aware. Denise attempted one final correction. I believed what I was told. Judge Judy responded without changing tone. Then you should have confirmed it before presenting it as fact. That ended the argument without needing emphasis. Judge Judy turned to Melissa. You submitted repair documentation? Yes, Melissa said. Consistent with inspection findings? Yes. A brief nod. Judgment for the plaintiff? Melissa exhaled quietly. Not relief in performance form, just release. Something finally resolved after being held too long. Judge Judy continued. Damages awarded as documented. A pause, then more measured. This case demonstrates something simple. Her gaze lifted slightly. When you rely on assumptions instead of verification, you do not just risk being wrong. You risk involving other people in that wrongness. A final glance toward Denise. And that responsibility does not disappear because the explanation sounded reasonable at the time. Denise said nothing. Mark said nothing. Judge Judy closed the file. This matter is concluded. The gavel followed. Clean, decisive, final. And what remained was not spectacle. It was structure returning to place. Because in a courtroom, stories can stand for a while, but only until something quiet and factual steps into the room and asks them to align.